My dad suspended me from home after I refused to apologize to my perfect sister. All I said was, "All right," and that one word changed everything he thought he controlled. Stay with me for a moment while I walk you through what really happened. And if this story reaches you in any way, feel free to support the channel with a like, a subscribe, or by sharing it with someone who needs to hear it. My name is Ariel Grant. I'm 19, the quiet one in my family. The one everyone seems to look past unless they need someone to blame. My sister, Nyla, is the complete opposite. She's 23, loud in all the right ways, charming when she needs to be, and somehow always shining under a light our father, Derek, never lets dim. To him, Nyla is a star. To me, she's the storm I've lived under my whole life. Growing up in that house felt like walking on eggshells while Nyla danced on clouds. She made mistakes, huge ones sometimes, but somehow they always became my fault. If she snapped at me, I was too sensitive. If she ruined something, I was not careful enough. And every argument ended the same way, Dad telling me, "Ariel, apologize to your sister." It didn't matter what happened. It didn't matter who started it. I was the one expected to say sorry. For years, I swallowed it. I told myself to keep the peace. I told myself it wasn't worth the fight. I told myself family was supposed to be like this, even though deep down, I knew it wasn't supposed to hurt this much. But the tension had been growing, thicker each day. Nyla had gotten more controlling. Dad had gotten more impatient with me. Even the air felt tight, like it was waiting for something to break. And eventually something did. It happened on a day that didn't feel any different at first. Nyla walked around with that proud little smirk she always wore after getting away with something. Dad barely looked at me, except to point out something I should have done better. It was all normal, painfully normal. But inside me, something was shifting. I didn't want to be the punching bag anymore. I didn't want to keep apologizing just to make them comfortable. That night, Nyla pushed things too far, again. And Dad took her side again. He didn't even listen to what happened. He just told me to say sorry. I remember standing there, feeling small and tired, wondering how many times I'd have to bend before I finally broke. When I didn't speak fast enough, Dad's voice got sharper. He told me if I couldn't apologize, I could get out until I learned respect. And I don't know what came over me. Maybe it was the years of pain. Maybe it was the quiet strength inside me finally waking up. But instead of crying or begging, I just said, "All right." The whole house froze. Even Nyla blinked like she didn't expect it. Dad thought that word meant he'd won. But really, it was the moment he lost all control over me. It started early in the morning, on a day that was supposed to mean everything to me. My scholarship project, the one I had worked on for months, the one that could change my entire future, was finally complete. I woke up excited, ready to submit it, ready to feel proud of something that belonged to me. But when I reached my desk, my heart dropped so fast it felt like hitting the floor. Pages were torn. The model I built was crushed. My laptop files were deleted. Everything I had poured myself into was destroyed. And standing in the doorway, with that same careless shrug she always had when she did something wrong, was Nyla. She didn't even try to hide it. "Oops," she said, acting like she accidentally ruined months of work. But her eyes told the truth. They were sharp, angry, jealous. She hated that for once, I was doing something better than her. She hated that someone else might finally notice me. I felt my chest tighten. "Why would you do this?" I asked, my voice shaking. Instead of answering, she rolled her eyes. "It wasn't a big deal. You can redo it." Redo it? The submission deadline was in hours. There was no time. She knew exactly what she had done. When Dad came home, I thought maybe, just maybe, he'd see the truth this time. I showed him the mess, explained what happened, thinking surely he'd be upset that she ruined something so important. But he didn't even look at the damage for more than 2 seconds. His focus went straight to Nyla, who had already started crying fake tears. "She's attacking me, Dad," she said, clutching her chest dramatically. "She's always trying to make me look bad." And just like that, it became my fault again. Dad turned on me with that disappointed look I knew too well. "Ariel, apologize to your sister." I felt something inside me crack. "For what?" I asked quietly. "She ruined my project." He shook his head like I was the one being unreasonable. "You need to stop provoking her. Say sorry so we can end this." For the first time, I didn't lower my head. "No," I said. "I'm not apologizing." The room went still. Dad stared at me like I had spoken some forbidden word. Then he said the sentence that changed everything. If you won't apologize, you're suspended from this house until you learn your place. Suspended. Like I was some child in school. Suspended from my own home. I could see Nyla smirking behind him, proud of what she had caused. Dad waited for me to break down. He expected tears, begging, something that proved he still controlled me. Instead, I simply nodded and said, "All right." The shock on his face was almost enough to make me laugh. I walked to my room and packed a small bag, just a few clothes, my dead laptop, and the little bit of dignity I had left. No money. No plan. No one in that house willing to stand up for me. And as I stepped out the door, with the cold air hitting my face, the truth settled deep in my chest. I wasn't just being pushed out. I was being abandoned. Ariel walked for almost an hour before she finally stopped. The streets felt unfamiliar, the air colder than usual, and the weight in her chest kept growing with every step. She had nowhere to go. No close friends she could show up to without warning. No extended family who ever checked on her. But then one name came to her mind, Aunt Reby. She hesitated. Her mother's older sister hadn't been around in years. She left the family after too many fights with Derek, and no one ever spoke about her except in whispers. But Ariel remembered her kindness from childhood, quiet but steady, like someone who chose honesty over pleasing people. So, with nothing left to lose, Ariel called her. The line rang once, twice, then a calm, firm voice answered. "Ariel? Is something wrong?" Those words alone made Ariel's throat tighten. She hadn't heard genuine concern in so long that it felt foreign. She explained, her voice trembling, that she was outside with a bag and needed somewhere to stay, just for a night. Aunt Reby didn't ask for details. She didn't question. She only said, "Come. You shouldn't be alone." When Ariel arrived at her apartment, Reby opened the door with a look that mixed shock and anger. Not at Ariel, but at whatever had pushed her out. She guided her inside, wrapped her in a warm blanket, and made her tea without a single judgmental word. That quiet kindness broke something inside Ariel, and before she could hold herself together, she began to cry, real, messy, painful tears she had swallowed for years. She told her everything. How Nyla always got away with hurting her. How Derek never once stood up for her. How she was pushed out with nothing, as if she didn't matter at all. The words came out like a storm, one after another, and Reby listened without interrupting. When Ariel finally finished, exhausted and shaking, her aunt sat beside her with a seriousness Ariel had never seen before. "You think this is your fault," Reby said softly. "But it never was." Ariel frowned, confused. "Then why does it feel like it?" Reby sighed deeply, the kind of sigh that carries years of holding things in. Then she started talking, not about Ariel, but about Derek. About the man he was before Ariel was even born. She revealed that Derek had always played favorites, even before their mother passed away. That he had cheated, lied, and manipulated to keep control of everything in the family. She explained that Nyla wasn't loved more. She was used more, shaped into the daughter who wouldn't challenge him. And when Ariel was born quieter, softer, harder to control, Derek slowly pushed her into the role of the scapegoat. "He needed someone to blame," Reby said. "And you were the easiest to silence." Hearing the truth was painful, but it also felt like air after drowning for so long. For the first time, Ariel realized she wasn't broken. She wasn't weak. She wasn't the problem. She was the one who finally stepped out of a place she was never meant to survive. Ariel woke up the next morning feeling lighter than she expected, though the ache from the night before still sat quietly in her chest. Aunt Reby made her breakfast, then simply said, "You need to stand on your feet now. Not for them, for yourself." Those words became the first brick in the new path Ariel was about to build. With no money and no real experience, she started searching for any job that would take her. Most places turned her away, but a small logistics office tucked behind a hardware store had a handwritten sign on the door. "Help wanted." She walked in, nervous but determined. Inside sat Mr. Omari Benson, a middle-aged man with sharp eyes but a gentle voice. He looked Ariel over, noticing her worn-out backpack and the anxiety she tried to hide. Instead of brushing her off, he asked, "What can you do?" She told him the truth. She could organize, she could learn fast, and she needed a chance. Something in her honesty must have moved him, because he nodded and said, "Start tomorrow." The job was simple, sorting files, tracking deliveries, making calls. But Mr. Benson didn't treat her like a temporary worker. He spoke to her like someone with potential. When she hesitated to ask questions, he taught her to speak up. When she struggled with confidence, he reminded her that closed mouths don't get fed. When he noticed how quietly she moved, he said, "People like us learn to disappear when we're raised in the wrong homes. But disappearing won't help you here." He also taught her something she never expected: the power of keeping receipts. Not just the physical ones she filed every day, but emotional ones too. The moments people try to rewrite, the lies they tell to cover their tracks. "Document everything," he told her. "Not for revenge. For protection. Truth is a shield when someone tries to twist your story." Those words stuck with her. At night, in Aunt Marembe's spare room, Ariel wrote everything she could remember. Arguments, insults, the destroyed project, the suspension. All the years she was blamed for things she didn't do. She kept dates, screenshots, photos. She wasn't sure why she needed it, but something in her gut told her it mattered. Slowly, she formed a plan. Not one fueled by anger or loud payback, but one built on quiet strength. She promised herself she would become someone her father and sister could no longer control. She would build something real, something that belonged to her. Her success would speak where she no longer had to. She didn't tell her family anything. No messages. No updates. No explanations. The silence was her shield, and every small win she earned became another step away from the place that broke her. Ariel didn't know exactly where this path would lead, but she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't going back to being the girl they could walk over again. Back at home, the atmosphere shifted almost immediately after Ariel walked out. Nyla tried to maintain her usual confident smile, but it wavered whenever she looked around and didn't see Ariel in the hallway or the kitchen, silently waiting for her to be blamed. Without Ariel as the constant target, she felt exposed. Her jokes that once landed perfectly now sounded sharp and cruel. Her charm, once effortless, began to falter under the weight of her own unchecked behavior. Derek noticed it too. He tried to cover for her, laughing a little too loudly at her sarcastic comments, smoothing over situations where she had been mean. But it didn't work. Relatives visiting for a casual Sunday lunch started noticing. Cousins whispered behind their hands about how Nyla spoke to the house help. Aunt Grace, who had always been subtle but observant, raised her eyebrows when Nyla snapped at the youngest cousin for dropping a plate. Derek's attempts to justify her behavior sounded weak, even to him, and he felt a growing sense of unease that he had never experienced while Ariel was there to absorb the blame. Nyla, sensing the shift, tried to regain control, but without Ariel there to manipulate, her efforts looked frantic. She sent messages, left voice notes, even drove to places Ariel had mentioned she sometimes stayed, all under the guise of concern. "Ariel, please, we miss you," she texted, punctuating the message with a string of crying emojis. But the truth was clear. She didn't miss Ariel, she missed her audience. She wanted the home returned to its old order, where Ariel played the obedient daughter, and Nyla could play the untouchable golden child. Derek, meanwhile, tried to patch over the cracks, telling anyone who asked that everything was fine, that Ariel just needed time. But each lie felt heavier, harder to deliver. Family friends started making subtle comments about how the golden child wasn't always perfect and how the troubled daughter might have been pushed too far. For the first time, Derek felt uncomfortable defending Nyla's actions. Meanwhile, Ariel didn't respond. She stayed focused on her work, her quiet progress a thorn in Nyla's side. Each day that went by without an apology or a return call made Nyla more restless, more agitated. Her jealousy twisted into a vindictive energy that she hadn't shown before. She tried manipulating other relatives, attempting to paint Ariel as ungrateful and reckless, but nothing stuck the way it used to. For the first time, someone had denied her what she wanted, and the denial stung. At home, Nyla's polished facade began to crumble. Her charm faltered, her temper flared, and the people who had once admired her started noticing the cracks. Derek felt the walls closing in, realizing that Ariel's absence had exposed more than just a missing daughter. It had revealed the fragile foundation upon which he had built his favorite's untouchable image. And through it all, Ariel remained distant, silent, and untouchable, exactly the way she had intended. Ariel's days had settled into a rhythm, but this rhythm was different from the life she had left behind. She arrived early at the logistics office, stayed late, and absorbed everything Mr. Benson taught her. Her attention to detail, her willingness to learn, and the quiet determination that had been buried for years began to shine. When the opportunity arose to apply for a competitive community entrepreneurship program, she hesitated only briefly before submitting her application. She poured all of her ideas into it, drawing from the scholarship project Nyla had destroyed, but which she had rebuilt in her mind, stronger and better. Weeks later, the acceptance letter arrived. Ariel felt a thrill she hadn't experienced in years, a mix of pride, relief, and a quiet satisfaction that belonged solely to her. The program was intense, demanding, and full of driven people, but Ariel fit right in. She learned to pitch ideas, negotiate deals, and present herself with confidence. Under Mr. Benson's guidance, she began shaping a small business inspired by her rebuilt scholarship project. For the first time, she had something entirely her own, something she had earned with sweat and determination, not handed down or stolen. Meanwhile, back home, word of Ariel's success began to filter through social circles. Nyla heard about it first from a mutual acquaintance, and fury replaced the usual smugness on her face. She could not believe that Ariel, the quiet, seemingly powerless sister, had taken a path that was producing results while she remained the center of gossip for all the wrong reasons. Nyla didn't just feel jealous, she felt threatened. Her stories to family friends shifted immediately, casting Ariel as ungrateful and arrogant, painting her sister as someone trying to outshine the family rather than achieve her own success. Derek, hearing some of the reports, confronted Ariel one evening with a familiar mix of anger and authority. "Ariel," he said sharply, "you've caused too much tension. Come home and apologize to Nyla. Fix this before it spreads further." His tone was almost the same as it had been when he demanded she apologize for the destroyed scholarship project, as though nothing had changed and as if Ariel were still the obedient child he could control. But Ariel had changed. She stood her ground, her voice calm but firm. "No, I'm not apologizing." The defiance stunned Derek, and the silence that followed was filled with tension thicker than anything Ariel had experienced before. Nyla, sensing her father's frustration, glared at Ariel through every phone call and indirect message she could send. Her jealousy grew with every day Ariel spent building her business, attending workshops, and connecting with mentors. Each small victory Ariel achieved only amplified Nyla's fury, making her attempts to manipulate, guilt, or control Ariel fail completely. For the first time, Ariel's independence was undeniable. She wasn't just surviving, she was thriving. And with each passing day, her confidence grew alongside her business, leaving Nyla more restless, more envious, and more desperate to regain the control she had always assumed was hers. The gap between them was no longer invisible. Ariel had risen, and Nyla could not hide her jealousy. The more Ariel grew, the more threatened Derek felt. He had built his authority on control over the house, over Nyla's ego, and especially over Ariel's silence. But now Ariel had slipped out of his grip. She was thriving in a program he thought she didn't deserve, surrounded by people who respected her. That alone made him uneasy, but when he heard she was developing a business idea that could gain real attention, something inside him snapped. In his mind, Ariel's success would expose everything he had tried to hide for years. His favoritism, his harsh treatment, his inability to guide her. So he took matters into his own hands. Quietly, without telling anyone, he contacted the program director. He introduced himself as Ariel's father and started weaving a story about her being emotionally unstable, impulsive, and needing supervision. He even suggested the program was putting too much pressure on her. But Derek didn't realize the director was a careful man. Instead of taking Derek's words at face value, he asked questions Derek stumbled through. Questions that forced him to contradict himself. And the more Derek spoke, the more obvious it became that he wasn't concerned for Ariel's well-being. He was concerned about losing control. The director ended the call unsettled and curious, so he decided to verify the information. That led to the truth unraveling. He reached out to Mr. Benson, who spoke highly of Ariel's work ethic and stability. He reached out to Aunt Marembe, who calmly explained the family history without bitterness, just facts. And then he checked the details Derek had provided, only to find gaps, exaggerations, and outright lies. Word spread quickly among the program team. Whispered conversations turned into raised eyebrows. What kind of father tried to sabotage his daughter's progress? Why would someone want to tear down a girl who was working so hard? The favoritism and manipulation Derek had kept hidden within the four walls of his home were now exposed to outsiders. When Ariel learned what her father had done, the hurt cut deep, but something stronger rose inside her, resolve. At the next community event hosted by the program, she walked up to Derek in front of relatives, mentors, and neighbors. Her voice didn't shake. Her hands didn't tremble. "I know what you did," she said, pulling out her phone and revealing the documented messages, the old recordings, the notes she had kept over the years. She didn't scream. She didn't insult. She simply laid the truth bare. The room grew silent. Aunt Mirembe stepped beside her, firm and steady, adding her own quiet testimony. For the first time, people saw the real story. How Derek had favored Nyla no matter what she did. How Ariel had been blamed for everything. How manipulation had been disguised as parenting. Derek's face drained of color as disbelief spread through the crowd. His credibility shattered right there. And as eyes shifted toward Nyla, her carefully polished golden child image began to crack. People finally saw the cruelty behind her smile, the entitlement in her posture, and the truth Ariel had carried alone for years. The family's facade didn't just break, it collapsed. Here is your 500-word chapter following only the outline you provided. The ripple effects of the truth didn't settle quietly. If anything, they struck with the precision of a delayed storm. Nyla, who had spent years constructing an image of perfection stitched together with charm, favoritism, and carefully curated lies, suddenly found herself standing in the open with no shelter. The moment Ariel's evidence surfaced, rumors began to travel through school hallways, group chats, and academic circles. It didn't take long before one of her teachers, already suspicious of the neatness of her sudden academic breakthroughs, began re-evaluating her submitted work. Patterns emerged, too similar wording, sources she couldn't explain, inconsistencies in timestamps. Her scholarship committee was alerted, and now Nyla was being called in for clarification meetings she couldn't manipulate her way out of. The friends who once worshipped her confidence now kept their distance, whispering about how quickly she had turned cruel when Ariel left. Without her sister to belittle, Nyla's temper flared at anyone who challenged her. That only accelerated her downfall. Her group project partners dropped her. Teachers stopped giving her the benefit of the doubt. Suddenly, the girl who walked like she owned the world was clutching her reputation with both hands, and losing her grip fast. Back at home, Derek felt the backlash as sharply as she did. His voice, once unquestioned in family discussions, now carried no weight. Relatives who used to applaud his parenting began quietly withdrawing support. Some simply stopped answering his calls. Others sent curt messages expressing their disappointment in how he had treated Ariel for years. Even the elders, who once believed he was simply strict, now understood the depth of the favoritism he had tried to hide. His defensiveness only made him look guiltier. The shame settled in, heavy and unavoidable. He tried reaching Ariel again, not out of regret, but desperation. But she no longer entertained explanations or guilt-soaked apologies. Her silence held more power than anything she could have said. She told him calmly once that she wasn't coming home. Not because she hated him, but because she finally understood she didn't need to set herself on fire to keep the family warm. And she meant it. While her family unraveled, Ariel built. Every morning she walked into the community innovation hub with the quiet confidence she was earning day by day. Her business idea, something small, sustainable, and entirely her own, began to draw interest from mentors and local organizations. Mr. Benson guided her through negotiations, marketing plans, and logistics, and her proposal slowly transformed into something real, something promising. For the first time, she didn't feel overshadowed. She wasn't the forgotten daughter or the convenient scapegoat. She was simply Ariel, capable, focused, and rising. The more her work gained traction, the clearer it became that she had left her old life behind not out of spite, but out of necessity. Her success didn't scream. It didn't boast. It simply grew, quiet, steady, unstoppable. And this time, she wasn't shrinking to make room for anyone else. Ariel's project didn't explode overnight. It grew with intention, discipline, and the quiet momentum of someone who had finally stepped into her own life. Local newspapers began highlighting the community entrepreneurship program, and Ariel's name kept appearing in their features. Her project, once just sketches and late-night notes, transformed into a functioning initiative that solved real logistical problems for small vendors in the area. People loved her idea for its simplicity and impact. She didn't chase recognition, yet it found her anyway. One afternoon, after reviewing her quarterly progress, Mr. Benson called her into his office. His smile told her everything before he even spoke. He offered her a formal partnership, equal stake, shared leadership, full creative control. It wasn't charity. It wasn't pity. It was earned. Ariel felt the weight of the moment settle into her chest, not as pressure, but as pride. She accepted. For the first time in her life, she wasn't just surviving, she was building, expanding, thriving. Her confidence grew in a way that wasn't loud or boastful. It showed in the way she held eye contact now, in the way she made decisions without doubting every breath, in the peace that lived in her routines. She no longer flinched at every phone vibration or worried about disappointing anyone. Her life belonged to her, and that truth changed everything. While Ariel rose, the cracks in her family widened into full fractures. Nyla watched her sister's success from a distance she pretended not to care about, but the jealousy ate at her in ways she couldn't hide. Each accomplishment of Ariel's felt like a personal attack. Her own reputation, once spotless, was still recovering from the academic misconduct investigation, and she found herself lashing out at friends, teachers, anyone who reminded her she wasn't untouchable anymore. The more she tried to regain control, the more she unraveled. Her social circle thinned. Opportunities dried up. She wasn't the golden child anymore. She was a cautionary tale. Derek wasn't doing much better. His attempts at apologizing were weak, surface-level gestures wrapped in self-preservation. He spoke about misunderstandings, about family unity, about moving forward, but never about the years of emotional neglect Ariel had endured. He wanted forgiveness not because he understood what he'd done, but because the family's perception of him had shifted. His pride had taken a hit, and he hoped Ariel could help restore it. But she saw the hollowness in every word. When he sent a message asking her to come home to talk things out, she replied a calm but firm decline. When he left a voicemail offering to put the past behind them, she didn't return the call. When he used relatives to pressure her into responding, she told them politely that healing didn't require proximity. Ariel wasn't angry anymore. She was done. Her success was no longer about proving anything to them. It was simply the natural outcome of having the freedom to grow. And their downfall? That was theirs to carry, not hers to fix. Ariel signed the lease to her first apartment with steady hands, but her heart trembled with a mixture of pride and disbelief. The place wasn't extravagant, one bedroom, warm lighting, a balcony facing a quiet street, but it was hers. Every inch represented the life she built without permission, without validation, and without the constant pressure to justify her existence. She walked through the empty space slowly, touching the freshly painted walls, imagining the future she would create inside them. To celebrate, she invited the two people who had stood beside her when she had nothing, Aunt Mirembe and Mr. Benson. She cooked a simple meal, stew, rice, vegetables, and set the table carefully, wanting this night to feel intentional. When they arrived, the energy in the room was soft, warm, and full of unspoken gratitude. They talked about the future, about opportunities, about the freedom that comes after escaping emotional captivity. No speeches, no grand gestures. Just the comfort of people who genuinely wished her well. But peace rarely goes uninterrupted. A loud knock rattled the door just as dessert was being served. Ariel froze. Aunt Mirembe's eyes narrowed. Mr. Benson's posture shifted protectively. She already knew who it was before she opened the door. Derek and Nyla stood outside, stiff with indignation and entitlement. They didn't congratulate her. They didn't ask how she was. They came with demands. "You've proven your point," Derek said, as if this were all a performance staged for his benefit. "Now come home and fix the family. Enough of this stubbornness." Nyla crossed her arms. "Yeah, we need you back. Things are falling apart. You're being dramatic, Ariel. Just apologize and stop causing problems." The words were familiar. Accusation masked as concern, blame disguised as love. Once they would have pierced her deeply. Now they barely stirred her. She opened the door wider, not to welcome them in, but to meet them eye to eye under the hallway light. Her heartbeat was steady, her voice calm. "All right," she said. Derek exhaled, relieved, already assuming victory. Then Ariel did something she had never done before. She stepped back, not toward them, but into her home, and slowly, deliberately closed the door in their faces. The click of the lock echoed through the apartment like a final chapter sealing itself. Not loud, not cruel, just final. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't argue. She didn't explain. Her silence was the boundary she had been denied all her life. When she returned to the table, Aunt Mirembe gave a slow, proud nod. Mr. Benson lifted his glass. Ariel sat down, but she felt taller somehow, more rooted, more herself. Outside, her father and sister banged on the door, calling her name. Inside, she took another bite of her meal and exhaled the weight of years. She wasn't going back. Not now. Not ever. Living well, without them, was the revenge she chose. And as she looked around her own home, surrounded by the people who valued her, she stepped fully into the freedom she had fought so hard to earn. Let me know your thoughts. Was Ariel right to shut that door for good? Or do you think she should have given her family one last chance? I'm really curious to hear what you think. And if you enjoy stories like this, make sure to hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another one.